Hey everybody, welcome into Folklore and Flourish. You're here with Jane today at Blue Box 29. So we are slowly transitioning into Mark doing his QHHT in our other room. And so he's already filling up his list of 25 for his internship. Is filling up pretty quick. But of course, with that happening and filling his life a little more, we are slowly going to transition our Folklore and Flourish back into kind of my baby. So we're going to see less of Mark here, but that's just because he's out helping and healing other people in different ways. But forget all that jazz. We're here today with the crown. Today is March 25th. You will be seeing Molly as well still. She's walking around right now, checking things out as I've been moving and rearranging. She is, of course, the only one that needs to approve is Molly, the sweet little kitten. Anyways, today is March 25th, the crown. So today's theme is worth is proved. Our worth is proved. I want to make it clear that the crown isn't what proves worth in this. The crown can only be earned through our own kind of self-reflection of, are we worthy? And then stepping up to it, and I'm embracing it fully when we get it. But anyways, our 4 stories for the theme of worth proved in the crown is going to be Hebrew, Egyptian, Incan, and Irish. So I will see you after these 4 stories. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to honor the cultures behind the stories we are about to explore. The tales shared here come from many peoples, lands, and traditions. I do not change these stories to fit modern expectations or to align with today's social standards. Instead, I present them as they were told, sometimes beautiful, sometimes harsh, sometimes challenging. We are not here to judge the past, but to understand it, to listen, to learn, and to honor the ancestors who carried these stories forward. We also share stories from various religious traditions. These are presented in their historical and spiritual context, with respect for their beliefs that they represent. Every culture deserves respect, context, and acknowledgement, and this space is dedicated to doing exactly that. Story 1, David and the Anointing of the Unexpected King. In the rolling hills of ancient Israel, where kings were expected to look a certain way, to carry themselves with visible strengths and outward authority, the story of David begins not in a palace, but in the fields, among sheep, unseen and overlooked even within his own family. And when the prophet Samuel is sent by God to anoint the next king after Saul, he arrives with an expectation shaped by human instinct, that leadership will be obvious, that the chosen one will stand out immediately. And so he is presented with David's brothers, each strong, capable, and fitting the image of what a king should be. Yet one by one they are passed over, not because they lack ability, but because they are not aligned with what is being sought. And in that moment, the story shifts, revealing that worth is not determined by appearance, status, or perception, but by something deeper, something internal. When David is finally brought in from the fields, still young, still unpolished, still outside the structure of power, Samuel recognizes what others have missed, and in the quiet and defining act, he anoints David with oil, marking him as the future king, not because he has proven himself in the eyes of others, but because he carries within him the alignment required for leadership. And this moment is not loud, not publicly celebrated, not immediately transformative in his circumstances. For David does not ascend to the throne that day. He returns to the same fields, the same life, the same responsibilities. Yet something has changed, something internal, something that cannot be undone. For he now knows who he is becoming. The path that follows is not immediate fulfillment, but continued testing, as David faces challenges that shape his identity, from protecting his flock against predators to later confronting Goliath, the giant warrior who represents an external manifestation of fear and doubt. And in that confrontation, David does not rely on the armor or weapons offered to him, choosing instead what he knows, what he has developed in quiet places, demonstrating that authority is not borrowed, but embodied. Even after this victory, his journey remains complex, marked by tension with Saul, periods of hiding, and moments where he must navigate not only external opposition, but internal responsibility. Learning that being chosen does not remove struggle, but deepens it, and that leadership requires not only strength, but discernment, patience, and the ability to remain aligned even when circumstances do not yet reflect the outcome. David's story reveals that the crown is not given at the moment of recognition, but built through the process that follows, that worth must be accepted before it can be fully lived, and that authority begins internally long before it is acknowledged externally. And in the end, when David does take the throne, it is not as someone who has suddenly become worthy, but as someone who has grown into what was already placed within him, shaped by every trial, every delay, every moment where he had to choose alignment over doubt. This story does not simply tell of a king, but of the process of becoming, where identity is first recognized in quiet moments, then tested through experience, and finally embodied through action, showing that the crown is not the beginning, but the result of a path walked with consistency, awareness, and the willingness to step into what has already been given, even before the world confirms it. Story 2: The Coronation of the Pharaoh. In ancient Kemet, the land known today as Egypt, kingship was not simply a position of power, but a sacred role, a living embodiment of divine order where the ruler, known as the pharaohs, stood as the bridge between the gods and the people, responsible not only for governance, but for maintaining Ma'at, the balance, truth, and harmony that sustained the world itself. And the moment of coronation was not merely a ceremony, but a transformation, a passage where identity shifted from individual to vessel, from person to living symbol of cosmic authority. The rituals surrounding coronation were deliberate and layered, often taking place in sacred spaces such as Memphis or Thebes, where priests, adorned in ceremonial garments, guided the process with precision, invoking the presence of the gods through offerings, chants, and symbolic acts. And at the center of this moment, the future pharaoh would undergo rites that connected him to divine lineage, aligning him with Horus, the god of kingship, and acknowledging his role as the earthly continuation of that divine authority. One of the most defining elements of the coronation was the placing of the crowns, particularly the double-crowned, Shent, which combined the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt, symbolizing unity, dominion, and the responsibility to hold together what could easily fall into division. And this act was not about adornment, but about acceptance, the visible acknowledgement that the individual now carried the weight of the land, its people, its stability, and its future. Alongside this, the pharaoh would take on new names, often including a throne name that reflected divine connection, marking the transition from personal identity to a role that extended beyond the self, reinforcing that leadership was not about individuality, but about service to something greater, something enduring. Yet this moment, though grand and ceremonial, did not remove the burden it represented. For to be pharaoh was to be constantly tested, to ensure that the Nile would flood as expected, the crops would grow, and the people would remain protected, and that the balance between order and chaos would be maintained. And any disruption, any failure, was not seen as random, but as a reflection of imbalance, placing immense responsibility on the one who wore the crown. The coronation, therefore, was not a reward, but a recognition, not the granting of worth, but the acknowledgement of it, requiring the individual to step fully into what had already been placed upon them, to accept authority not as privilege, but as duty, and to understand that leadership begins not when power is given, but when it is embodied. This story reveals that the crown is not something that changes who a person is, but something that reveals it, that authority is not created by ceremony, but confirmed through it, and that the true weight of leadership lies not in being chosen, but in choosing to carry what the selection demands. And in the end, the pharaoh stands not as a figure elevated above others, but as one aligned with a greater order, holding together the seen and unseen, the human and the divine, in a role that is as demanding as it is sacred. Story 3. The Rise of the Sapa Inca. High in the Andes Mountains, where the air thins and the land stretches across vast ridges and valleys, the Inca civilization developed a system of leadership that was both political and sacred, centered around the figure of the Sapa Inca, the unique Inca, a ruler believed to be the direct descendant of the sun god Inti. And within this belief, kingship was not simply inherited as a title, but assumed as a responsibility to embody divine order on earth, to maintain unity across a vast empire, and to assure that the relationship between people, land, and cosmos remained intact. When a new Sapa Inca rose to power, the transition was marked not only by ceremony, but by expectation, for he did not merely take the place of the one before him. He stepped into a role that required immediate alignment, where identity and authority merged, and the individual was no longer separate from the position he held. And the rituals that accompanied the rise reinforced that transformation, including processions, offerings, and the acknowledgement of lineage, connecting the new ruler to those who had come before and to the divine source from which his authority was believed to originate. Yet, unlike the idea of leadership as a singular moment of elevation, the role of the Sapa Inca demanded continuous demonstration, for the empire relied on systems of agriculture, labor, and communication that required coordination and foresight, and the ruler was expected to oversee not only governance, but the well-being of the people, ensuring that resources were distributed, that infrastructure, such as roads and terraces, were maintained, and that the balance between human activity and the natural environment was preserved, reflecting a worldview in which leadership was inseparable from stewardship. The Sapa Inca also engaged in rituals that reinforced his connection to Inti, particularly during festivals such as Inti Raymi, where the sun was honored and the continuity of life was celebrated. And in these moments, the ruler was not acting as an individual seeking recognition, but as a representative of something larger, carrying the weight of both tradition and expectation. And though the position held immense authority, it also carried immense pressure. For any disruption, whether in harvest, climate, or stability, could be seen as a reflection of imbalance, placing the responsibility squarely on the one who wore the crown. This story reveals that leadership is not defined by the moment of ascent, but by the ability to sustain what is inherited. That authority is not a static condition, but a continuous act of alignment, requiring awareness, discipline, and the willingness to serve beyond personal interest. And that being chosen does not remove the need to prove, but rather deepens it, asking the individual to grow into the role they now embody. In the end, the Sapa Inca stands as more than a ruler, but as a living connection between people and the divine, between land and order. And in that, the story reflects the idea that the crown is not something worn lightly, but something carried fully, not as a symbol of status, but as a commitment to uphold what has been entrusted, showing that true authority is not claimed through dominance, but through responsibility, continuity, and the ability to stand within a role that extends far beyond the self. Story 4. The Kings of Tara and the Sovereignty of Ireland. On the ancient hill of Tara, a place woven deeply into the mythic and historical identity of Ireland, kingship was never understood as something taken by force alone, but as something recognized, confirmed through alignment with the land itself. And the high kings who stood upon the hill were not simply rulers of people, but guardians of sovereignty, bound to the well-being of the land and its harmony. For an Irish tradition, the right to rule was closely tied to the concept of the sovereignty goddess, a symbolic representation of the land's spirit, which would only align with the ruler deemed worthy, creating a relationship where leadership was not imposed, but granted through resonance. One of the most enduring symbols of this truth was the Leah Fall, the stone of destiny, said to cry out when the rightful king stood upon it, a sound that signified not only recognition, but confirmation that the individual and the role were in harmony. And while this may appear as legend, its meaning runs deeper, expressing the belief that authority is not self-declared, but revealed through alignment, through the ability to stand in a place where identity and responsibility meet without fracture. The kings who come to Tara do not arrive without trial, for their worth had already been tested through acts of courage, leadership, and wisdom. Yet even then, the final moment required something internal, something that could not be performed or imitated. For the land itself was said to respond only to truth, and in that moment, the crown was not placed upon the head as an external symbol, but assumed as an internal reality, one that demanded the king uphold justice, maintain balance, and ensure prosperity. For if he failed in these duties, the land itself would reflect it, becoming barren or unstable, reinforcing the belief that leadership and environment were inseparably linked. This relationship between ruler and land created a form of kingship that was less about dominance and more about stewardship, where power was measured not by control, but by the ability to maintain harmony, to listen, to act with integrity, and to remain aligned with the need of both people and place. And this expectation shaped the identity of those who held the role, requiring constant awareness that the crown was not a static achievement, but a living responsibility that had to be carried daily. The stories of Taro remind us that leadership is not proven once, but continually, that authority is not secured through title alone, but through the ongoing ability to embody what that title represents, and that being chosen is only the beginning of a deeper commitment, one that requires presence, accountability, and the willingness to remain in alignment even when it is difficult. In the end, the High King stands not as someone elevated above the land, but as someone in relationship with it, reflecting the idea that true authority is not about separation, but about connection, not about ruling over, but about standing within, and that the crown, when fully understood, is not something placed upon the head, but something carried within, revealed through action, sustained through integrity, and confirmed through the harmony it creates. Buddy, welcome back into Folklore and Flourish. You're here with Jane, and Molly has finally joined. She's found that she still gets paid in treats, whether she's on time or not, in the integrity of her timeliness. But she does her best. She's here, right? Right, sweetheart? Yes, she's here. That's all that matters. And she is ready to talk about the crown. So today is all about the crown. We saw with our 4 stories the theme of worth proven right away. And our lesson is that authority is assumed. Authority is assumed because with all these stories, as we saw, in some traditions, in some cultures, there's some sort of symbol, some sort of signaling from something divine that this is this is the rightful ruler. And other times it's people out on the search for that, looking for someone that's fitting what they're looking for. And right away in King David, one of the most famous kings who in no way, shape, or form did anyone think it would be a king. Did they think he was going to be a king? Absolutely not. He was smaller, he was quieter, he was different than what they were used to. And especially when we're living in times of brute force and strength, leadership can be found in unexpected places, especially when we've been living in that thought process for so long that that's what we assume leaders look like. So it's cool to see, and we know just like all rulers, David went through his trials and tribulations with temptation, with some very difficult to live with choices, but it was a lot more than just getting the crown and sitting in it. David had to earn it, and he earned it through a lot of his trials and a lot of his tribulations. He just kept going. Just thinking about the David and Goliath thing and how the odds were definitely against David. You know, everyone was like, this is it. This is what you've given. And he steps up to the challenge and he proves that it is not all about brute force. Yes, it is a physical altercation, but he's using his wit and strategy more than he is just his impulse or his survival. And then we go into the second one. So the second story is the coronation of the Pharaoh. So we've seen throughout so many different Egyptian stories that the Pharaoh is said to be a divine being, right? Part of that divine lineage, maybe not the being itself, but the divine lineage. And we kind of talked about with Set and Horus the other day. Should Horus have destroyed Set? It's not up to us to decide. But in this, we learn that Horus, that's against his nature on a number of levels. But first and foremost, Horus is the light. He is the divine right to rule, the kingship. He is the royal line. And so he doesn't have to destroy his adversaries. He doesn't have to completely annihilate anyone that stands against him. He is the rightful heir. He is the rightful ruler. And he proved it time and time again. And then this story shows us that to be blessed by Horus, to be chosen by Horus, that is the Pharaoh getting his rightful, place, his rightful time on the throne. It's really cool to think about how Egypt, we always think of Egypt as just one thing, rather than the fact that we see in this one, the upper and lower Egypt. So the double crown actually holding significance of union. And that it's not just, oh, it's just one big Egypt. No, these are two separate pieces of Egypt. And we honor their uniqueness. We honor how different they are, but yet they are united. It's not everything has to melt and conform into one specific thing. Egypt honored the diversity, right? And we see it with this coronation. And I like how it also says, just like Horus himself, the pharaohs are constantly tested. I mean, the Nile didn't flood while you were pharaoh. That's a sign that you may not have been the correct choice to rule, or that something was seriously wrong. There was corruption, things like that. So it wasn't just every decision you made as a pharaoh was being judged, but the way the earth responded during your kingship. I just thought that was so cool. And that big emphasis right at the end, and well, I guess with all of it, is that authority is not given to elevate. It is accepted to uphold. So it's not just given without, okay, any guidebook or things you need to do or your responsibilities. To accept it, you are promising to uphold your duties as the pharaoh and to uphold your duties as Horus's chosen, right? Because to falsely step into that role as well is to risk angering Horus himself or the rest of Egypt. All right, so story 3, the rise of the Sapa Inca. I love how it's the Sapa Inca, the unique Inca, because it's a direct line from this, what was it? It's a direct line, direct descendant of the sun god Inti. So this is a being that's not just chosen or said to be the son of or anything like that, but this is coming from a direct bloodline. And what I liked about doing it through the Incan perspective is that through the Incan perspective, they weren't just getting their coronation, they weren't just getting their crown as a huge ceremony, but there was a huge expectation. So let me reread that. So it was a huge expectation for the Sapa Inca, for he did not merely take the place of the one before him. He stepped into a role that required immediate alignment, where identity and authority merged, and the individual was no longer separate from the position he held. So it's a huge acknowledgement and honestly a huge invitation for the Sapa Inca to step into that role, to go, I'm no longer who I was before. I am the embodiment of all those who came before me and all those who will come after. But most importantly, I am who I am now as this person who is in charge, as this person with immense responsibility. So it wasn't just the governance taking care of the people, but it was also ensuring that the resources were being used wisely, right? The infrastructure, making sure that the gods were appeased. And this was done through a number of different rituals. But I think that something huge with the Incan culture, not just back when there was the rise of the Sapa Inca coming or the number of different rulers, but just something about that culture is the sense of survival mode isn't like this panic all the time. It's a community responsibility, burden, and like gift to live every day where, yeah, you are giving more than you're receiving. You are ensuring that everyone's okay, not just yourself. And it's so much easier to do that when you have a ruler who steps into their position and they go, it's no longer I, it's we. We need to do this. We have to facilitate this. We don't see a whole bunch in a lot of other cultures where the crown, the lineage was from the same bloodline specifically. It kind of felt like the longer it was in those bloodlines, the more it kind of got corrupt or that those people involved just had too much baggage. With this, though, it was you were allowed to be an individual beforehand. You could do this or that, or it doesn't really matter. But the second you step into your kingship, that's where your decisions matter. That's when you're going to be watched and analyzed and all this stuff. Whereas later on, when you have to keep everything in hiding and keep everything in secret, it teaches you some bad habits and ultimately leads to, well, a lot of the stuff we've seen with some royal bloodlines in the past, and most, if not all, are gone, right? Because of that, it eventually catches up to you, but not in this case, you know? The way it caught up to the Inca was through their kindness and consideration. That very essence of giving more than you take led to their demise, but it's a much better demise than outliving everyone else, but having to live with that corruption and that almost disease within you because you've destroyed or lied or harassed or did whatever you needed to do to make sure your bloodline kept going. And no, I'm not saying anyone in particular. You can think of movies or whatever um, with royal bloodlines, and you can see that. I mean, it's a pretty common theme for a reason. And then our fourth and final one, the last one kind of gave a lot of signs it gave signs right away when the person was ready and they stepped up to the task. So the Leah Fall, a stone of destiny, was said to cry out where the rightful king stood upon it. So the Irish had something that the kings of Tara, they were everyone was notified right away by the earth that this is the rightful ruler. That didn't mean that they were going to be a great or a terrible ruler. They were just a rightful ruler. They were the ruler of this time. This is what they get. This is the person that can do that. And I'm saying that because, yeah, the earth may choose the wrong ruler. That's not at all true. The earth isn't against us. The universe isn't against us until we put ourselves against it, until we continue to take more than we give. And with this, it may be a ruler that causes problems or may not be the best, but it was what was needed. There was always a reason. I'm thinking about Mark when I say this, that everything happens for a reason. So the corruption may happen, the fall may happen, a famine, whatever it may be, but it'll rise back up. And we get to see that now. Ireland is still around now. And I mean, they have gone through some serious stuff where there were a lot of people dying, right? They were sent out of their country. Their fields were burned. They were captured as slaves. And yet they still live on, you know? Wow, we're listening to a singing stone, a singing rock that some people may think, but why have they outlived so many others? Why have they outlasted? Why do they continue to win fights that they have no business, winning? And it's just because it has a heck of a lot more to do with having the rightful ruler in the place than the numbers. And we see that constantly of how when you are being led by someone who holds the crown, right? The crown is always heavy, but someone that holds it up and goes, we have to do this. This is the right thing. And charges forward, regardless if they're afraid, if they're worried, if they know they can't win. It is better to go down fighting than to roll over and show your belly and surrender everything, because we know throughout history, whenever there's a surrender, it isn't this respectful, peaceful little, you guys can keep what's important to you. It's not. It's destruction. It's chaos. It's annihilation of entire cultures. And so when you have a ruler or a king, anything, that they're in their rightful place and you can feel it, you can see the changes, life becomes very different. Life becomes a lot lighter when you have someone that can hold the crown with integrity and with fairness. And I just really loved all four of these stories today because it kind of gave me hope, that there are still leaders out there that can hold the crown well. They can hold it up with integrity. And I've been struggling to find that for a while, and It's not that everyone's perfect, but just having someone who's willing to have integrity as a ruler, someone that it was the right ruler for the people, and the universe listened and the people listen. That's beautiful. It's really tough when you have leadership that isn't right for the people, that does only care about certain groups. And we see that all the time around the nation, around the world today. And we all have our different perspectives of what that looks like, you know? Because some people may think it's great, it's benefiting them. They don't see it, you know? And others are going, yeah, this is just the worst leadership I've ever seen. But whichever way we think, all we can do is do our best. And we saw that with King David, with the pharaohs, with the Sapa Inca and the kings of Tara. It may not be what we expect it to be, right? They may not be perfect. They may have this higher purpose, whatever it may be, but all we can do is trust them to do what's right by us. Truly. There is a lot of trust that the people have to give to their leadership. And all we can do is hope that they do the best by us and by our little kittens. Okay. But with all four of those stories, we're going to go ahead and read the daily thread. So the daily thread is that today we enter the crown, where identity is no longer forming, but claimed. With David, we see that worth is recognized before it is visible. Through the Pharaoh, authority becomes responsibility carried with alignment. Through the Sapa Inca, leadership is sustained through stewardship, through care. At the Hill of Tara, true authority is revealed through harmony with the land. Each story reminds us the crown is not given, it is grown into. Where are you being asked to fully step into who you already are? Leadership begins when worth is accepted rather than questioned. Accepted, embraced, earned. It's not always this, you have to go through all these trials to earn it. Sometimes you're given the role of the leader and you have to learn on the go. Sometimes there are people that are thrust right into a position where they have to go, okay, I know you've never dealt with this before, right? Like we saw with King David. You've never dealt with this before, and you were absolutely not like any of the others who look like they do a better job, but you're it. And we need you to step up. We don't know what that looks like yet. We don't know what that is yet, but we need you to step up. So it's something that can be earned every day, just like it can be lost any day. And with that in mind, the question of the day is, where am I chosen? Okay, we don't need to have an actual crown on our head or to have the title of president or principal or supervisor, whatever it may be. We don't have to have that to feel chosen, to feel like we belong, to feel like people look up to us. Everyone is looked up to by someone, truly, whether we believe it or not. And then our activity today you're just going to touch your head briefly, okay, and acknowledge the weight of authority. So I suggest you touch up, you're going to touch your head. You can do it however you'd like. It can be in the shape of a crown. You can respect, embrace, acknowledge your crown chakra, but you're just going to touch it briefly and acknowledge the weight of authority, whether you feel like you have any or not. You truly do. Find that area where, yeah, this is where I really stick out. This is where I really lead. This is something I'm confident in. And then feel that. Feel what that weight of authority feels like. And then with all of that in mind, I just want to, remind you that leadership begins when worth is accepted rather than questioned. So our leadership truly, truly takes off when we accept our worth. We're no longer questioning it. And this is something I've been really struggling with lately, is that it's always easy during the good times to feel worthy, to feel good about yourselves. But it's the challenging times when you have to really look at yourself and go, what is it that I'm struggling with? Is it me? Is it this? Is it that? What do I fix? And remember that even if it's something we have to fix within ourselves, acknowledge within ourselves, heal within ourselves, that doesn't mean we're not worthy. We are still worthy. Every single day that we wake up, we are worthy, because the only, person that it truly matters to is whatever your higher being is that you think. If you don't believe in anything, then it's you're self-conscious and you are worthy, right? So that's what we got to remember. And I'm saying that and I'm preaching that because I'm preaching it to myself. I've been really struggling with that lately. And yeah, there's so many things that I could say with that. But honestly, nothing matters more than sometimes you just got to lift your head up and make sure everybody knows that it doesn't matter what's said or done, because you're going to continue to hold your head up, right? That authority, that leadership is something that it is a burden. It is heavy. There is a responsibility to it, and it tests you, right? It tests you. I'm just going through the test right now, and our heroes are kind of reaching the point. Our tested heroes are kind of reaching the point where their destiny is getting sealed in this final week. So yeah, we're getting to the end. We're getting to the woohoo, we made it, we did it, victory, all that stuff. But we still have a little ways to go, and there still is testing along the way. There is still a life to live until you're 6 feet under, or your body's 6 feet under, right? And your soul is gone. Until that day, there's always going to be tests. There's always going to be obstacles. There's going to be amazing times, and there's going to be terrible. And it's just exciting that we get to live it. But with all of that in mind, today was just day one, we're kind of trickling into April. So we're going to start transitioning into that. Again, it was March 25th with the crown. And you will be seeing Mark still coming up to guest appearance, to guest host with me, and to be here. But he really is taking off in his QHHT, and I'm so excited and proud for him. I know that this is something he was very excited about and he wanted to do, and now he's getting that opportunity to heal people through that. So we will hear more from him in the Behind the Blue Box with Mark, or the QHHT YouTube channel. So Mark's YouTube channel will have a lot of behind the scenes. Obviously, it will not have the actual therapy sessions, but it'll have some more discussions of just how his experiences have been with it, what he enjoys, what he's struggling with. I truly don't know what he's going to talk about, so you'll get to see more of Mark there. But to see more of me, stay tuned, and I will catch you guys tomorrow with the law. Say bye, Molly. She says bye.